Hello, welcome to an episode of the Let People Prosper series. My name is Dr. Vance Gann. I hope you're having a prosperous day. Well, today we're recording this on March 6, 2023, and it's none other than the Liberty Warrior, the Happy Warrior, the pro-growth freedom fighter, Dr. Arthur Laffer. Art, welcome to Let People Prosper show.
Well, thank you very, very much. It's fun being on with you, Vance.
Well, it's really a pleasure to have you on. Father of supply side economics, just all the great things that you've done over the years of really bringing back this pro-growth message, something that we need more than ever. This is one reason why I wanted you on the show along, just to have a good conversation. Let me go ahead and give your bio to the audience, and then we'll jump right into it. Art Laffer is the founder and chairman of Laffer Associates, an economic research and consulting firm. As a result of Dr. Laffer's economic insight and influence in starting a worldwide tax-cutting movement during the 1980s, many publications have named him the father of supply-side economics. He is founding member of the Congressional Policy Advisory Board, which assisted in forming legislation for the 105th, 106th, and 107th Congress. Dr. Laffer served as a member of the President Reagan's Economic Policy Advisory Board for both of his two terms. In March 1999, he was noted by Time magazine as one of the century's greatest minds for his invention of the Laffer Curve, which has been called one of a few of the advances that powered this extraordinary century. He has received many awards for his economic research, including 2 Graham and Dodd Awards from the Financial Analyst Federation. He graduated from Yale with the bachelor's degrees in economics in 1963 and received both his MBA and PhD in economics from Stanford University. There's a lot more that goes into that, but that's a good overview of your past and all of the successes that you've had. So now the first question here today, like I do with all my guests, is what motivates you to do what you do each and every day?
Well, let me just say that, let me start by how I got into economics. I was a math major, undergraduate there at Yale. I went to the University of Munich. I'd had almost all the math courses that they'd had there in my thing at the University of Munich. So I took economics classes and Betriebswirtschaft and Volkswirtschaft, macro and micro there. And I fell in love with the topic, Vance. I just fell in love with it. And I happen to be very blessed over the years. I come from a very privileged background. My father went to prep school. My grandfather was a brain surgeon. I've had privilege there, so I could choose what I loved rather than what I thought would be best for my income and future career. So I went into economics because I loved it. And I really thought it mattered a lot. And that's how I did it at Yale. I switched to economics, and then I went to Stanford Business School, which was the traditional one in my family to do. I did really well in the business school, but I flipped over and went into the econ department because I loved the topic. I turned down some great jobs and became an economist because I loved it. And that's how I really got motivated. And I still do, Vance. I still sit there and dream of economics and how to make it happen, and to help the world, and to just enjoy the subject. There are so many, Vance, who go into economics because they think it's good for their career. It's a matter of love just for being in economics and for me. And for these other people, it's not. It's a matter of how they can increase their position in the world. And it's a totally different. I want to study what economics is, not how to control it and use it to my advantage like these other people.
Well, that's a great way to put it, Art, and it kind of sets it in perspective of what economics is. It's really studying the exchange of humans and trying to improve their lots in life, given scarce resources that are around us. And there's a lot of ways to do that, but we need to make sure that we're able to look at the opportunity cost, the trade-offs that happen, and so much more, which I know you've been doing throughout your career. Part of that has been with the Laffer Curve and working in the Reagan administration and others. What were kind of the big steps that you see throughout your life of getting you to where you're at today, other than just the love of economics, which I share with you?
Yeah, well, I guess what I'd say is the first thing to do is you have to have a framework in which you can work on economics. How do you make it work for you? I mean, obviously the free market, the competitive model, all of that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot more to it than that. But once you have the model, the framework, then what you want to do is get data. And let me give you an example. Taxes on the rich. Now, this is the big debate and has been for centuries on taxes on the rich and getting them to pay their fair share. I can easily imagine that if you raise taxes on the rich, you will make them a little bit worse off, but you'll collect more revenues. And with the more revenues, you can make the poor, the lower echelons of the economic ladder better off. I can imagine that. I can also imagine a situation where if you raise tax rates on the rich, you'll destroy them from doing their activities. They'll shelter their income. You won't get much revenue from them. In fact, you may even lose revenue, and that will be disastrous to the poor, the minorities, the disenfranchised. Both of those are purely conceivable. I mean, obviously, just theoretically, there's no reason to prefer one over the other. It's just a matter of empirical. But when you look at the data, now we have every single tax return from 1913 to the present. We have facts. It's not a matter of what's your opinion or how you feel. I mean, when you look at these data, what do they tell you? They tell you that every time you raise tax rates on the rich, the economy underperforms, Vance. Every time you raise tax rates on the rich are hurt. They are, and their incomes go down. But what they do report, they shelter enormously, and the big damage is done to the lowest echelons of the economic ladder. They're really, the Great Depression was high tax rates caused it all the way. And the poor really suffered during this. Now, the rich suffered too. And the last thing is that every time we've raised tax rates on the rich have earned less, they've sheltered more, and tax revenues from the rich, from the top 1% of income earners, have gone down. These are the facts every damn time. So, you can talk all you want, you can blether, go on day and night. But if you're fact-based, as you and I are, you've got to comport with the facts. How many good little cute theories have been destroyed by bad little facts? And that's the truth here now. This is what's happening. And anyone who talks like Biden and says those things is not cognizant of the facts that happen. When they go to raise tax to the rich, believe me when I tell you, the economy will underperform and the poor will be hurt and they'll lose revenues.
Yep. And we've seen that time and again. Right, where even when they've raised taxes or lower taxes, the share of GDP, one measure to look at it, stays about the same, right around 17%.
You got it.
Because it's going to slow down the economy. You have crowding out effects. Incentives matter. People will work or they'll not work depending on what those taxes rates are. And going around the tax code, it's still legal to do so. I think what they try to make it out as that these people are doing something illegally because they're not paying their taxes, their fair share, quote unquote, fair share of taxes. But it's all legal within the tax system because it's so complicated. But there are also ways to get in it once you have a good tax accountant and things of that nature. It's one reason why I think from what your work has shown, Dr. Laffer is looking at something that's the broadest base with the lowest rate possible. And then that allows you to bring in the amount of taxes to fund limited government, where you've got to have both of those going together for a flourishing civil society and more economic growth. Whenever you've looked at this and coming up as the father supply side economics, what really drove you in that direction to look at the supply side of the economy as really being the driving factor of growth?
The incentive effects started coming out in the data. And how did you look at the supply side of the equation? If you go back to microeconomics, and it's the apple market, you have a demand for apples and you have a supply of apples. And the question I do is just imagine we discovered that apples have discovered they have a certain hallucinogenic quality, raise your sex drive or whatever they do. And what would happen to the market if we all discovered? Well, there'd be a huge increase in the demand for apples. The quantity of apples would increase and the price of apples would rise. All right. Likewise, if you discovered that apples cause cancer, there'd be a huge drop in the demand. The price of apples would fall and the quantity transacted would fall. That's the demand side, which is perfectly correct. This is where all the economists are in macroeconomics. But there's the other side. Imagine that you had a bumper crop in apples one year. Imagine that the trees produced twice as much as they did, or a whole bunch of new trees came online, and there was a huge increase in the supply of apples. What would happen? Well, you would have a huge increase in the quantity of apples transacted, and the price of apples would fall. These are two equal things. I think Marshall said it was the two blades of a scissors. You need both a demand and a supply to there. Well, the same thing's true in macroeconomics, Vance. It's no different than it is in price theory. There's a demand for goods and services. That's very true. But there's also a supply for goods and services. Now, what is the supply of goods and services? It depends on the marginal rate of substitution between labor and leisure, between savings and capital formation and all of that. And there's also the demand side as well, which you can look at both of them. And now the macroeconomists for probably the last 50, 60, 70 years have only looked at the demand side of the economy. They assume that supply is like a rubber womb, which accommodates unembarrassingly any fetus of aggregate demand. That's what they've been assuming. Well, back in the 60s and 70s, when I had your job, when you were in the, I looked at this thing and I found some very interesting facts. Government purchases, this is my formal model of the economy, which I did when I was there. Government purchase of goods and services. When you increase government purchase of goods and services, there is an increase in GDP, concurrent increase in GDP, but it was exactly equal to the increase in government purchase of goods and services. So demand is increased by that, and over the next 4 quarters, it disappears. There's 100% crowding out in 4 quarters. But, that shocked me because I've been trained as a Keynesian, as everyone back then was. Then I also found out that an increase in government transfer payments actually caused a decline in GDP. How the heck does that happen? Well, I struggled with this. Finally, I came out with my complete model of the economy, which is in the Journal of Finance there, the ISO revenue, and all of this. And of course, it's obvious that if your transfer payments pay people not to work, you not only have an increase in the transfer, so it's taking away from the productive sector, which will give you less supply, but this also pays people not to work, which will also reduce supply. And then I came through with what is called the supply side model with Jude Winniski and some other people back then. There were not many economists. Bob Mundell was in on it as well. But, his was much more of a demand side view of the world back then. His monetary and my monetary coincided 100%. But that's when we started doing the supply side of the economy. Government spending, government transfer payments causes output to fall, not rise. Government purchases of goods and services will cause output to rise for a short period until you bid away the resources. And if you look at it, tax rates are really important in there. I mean, let's imagine I raised your tax rates to 110% of everything you earned. So every time you went to the office, instead of getting a check, you got a bill. How long would you work? Not very. So marginal rates of substitution are only tax rates. And you look at the corporate tax rate, you look at the Social Security tax rate, your personal income tax rate, average and marginal, and you look at all of these different ones in there. And that's what it came. And still to this day, the Keynesians don't think of anything other than that. And, they know very well that if you raise tax rates to 110% on everyone, they know it will, but they can't keep their fingers off demand. Supply is equally as important as demand. And I'm not saying demand isn't important, Vance, but I'm saying that supply is equally as important in macro as well as in micro. And then they all go poof, poof, poof. Well, the Laffer curve is a very simple, very testable proposition. If you raise tax rates, what happens to revenues? What you've just said a second earlier. If you raise tax rates, it's unambiguously clear, marginal tax rates, that the economy will produce less. And if revenues as a share of GDP stay the same, what does that tell you about revenues? They're going to go down. And and those numbers that you cited are exactly correct. We called it Hauser's law back in the 70s, but it's what you say is true. And so therefore, it's very clear that if you look at all of the interactions in the economy, when you raise the highest marginal rates, not only do the rich pay less in taxes, but everyone else does too. The economy underperforms and it's just obvious.
Yeah.
But these guys, it's voodoo economics, blah, 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 blah. It gives me a huge advantage over these other people who claim to be educated. And they just simply aren't, Vance.
No.
And I gladly debate any one of them anytime. You maybe should set up this debate, but we're glad just find out what are the facts when you raise one of the highest marginal tax rates on the rich. Well, you don't get the money, you cause the economy to underperform, and you really hurt the lowest echelons of the economic ladder. Those are the facts. And, I can't tell you anything more than that. It happens with states, all the stuff I've been doing in states. My book, The Wealth of States in 2014, if you look at it, if you have 2 locations, A and B, and if you raise taxes in B and you lower them in A, producers and manufacturers and people are going to move from B to A. I mean, it's just simple. They move there, they shelter their income more. The people who move are the rich. The people who come into the bad states are the poor. And so you have all of these things. They change not only the location of their income, they change the timing of their income, they change the composition of their income, and they also change the volume of their income. And so do the recipients of welfare. If I gave you $1 million today, Vance, just, hey, I love you, dear, here's a check for $1 million, what's the first thing you do? Well, first thing you do is shout your friends a beer, and then you I want to take 6 months off and see the world. It stopped working. The income effects of a transfer recipient cause a reduction in work effort. The income effects of a transfer payer cause an income in work effort, but they have the higher marginal tax rates there. So you find out it's just straight microeconomics. It's the Slutsky equations all the way. But I guess any random professor at Harvard didn't even know what the Slutsky equation is. They don't know what the income, they don't know the four components of total government spending. You have the one that was the old Marxist one, which was the government production of the goods and services. That's an issue we haven't debated for a long, long time. That's Oscar Lange, Paul Baran, and all of these people who wanted the government to own the means of production. But that's not debated anymore. But then you have the three others. We have transfer payments, where you take from Peter and give to Paul. You make Peter worse off and you make Paul better off, and the income effects balance out to zero. The positive income effects on Peter are offset by the negative income effects on Paul, but the substitution effects aggregate, meaning you'll get lower transfer payments. Any transfer payments will reduce total output, period. It's math. It's not, oh, my opinion is different from yours. That's stupid. It's not how you feel. It's what are the actual results. Then you have garbage goods, and then you have public goods too. And those are the four goods, and these guys just don't get it.
Well, I think one thing they forget is that, or they choose to forget, is that nothing is free, that there's always a trade-off. I think to them that government spending doesn't matter, or sorry, it does matter. It can increase aggregate demand because you need something that's going to turn the knobs of the economy. I mean, I think they really believe it's a machine that they can manipulate to get the output that they want. But as you're turning the knobs, you're changing the behavior. Your latest book, Taxes Have Consequences, is a great book, which I'll be sure to put in the show notes page, link to that talk about all the stuff that you just mentioned. Whenever you look at the trade-offs that happen, the consequences of raising those taxes, and it doesn't really change the share of income either of how much they're paying in taxes. The top 1% still pay about 40% of the income taxes. Top 10% pay around 70% of taxes. The top 50% pay around 97% of all taxes. I mean, it stays about the same whether you change it or not. And I remember a debate that you had with Jared Bernstein at the Texas Public Policy Foundation's policy orientation about a decade ago now. But you mentioned something that was just really insightful for me as someone who was really learning about economics at the time, is that you should always be able to break it down to a two-person economy. What are the trade-offs? If you're going to spend more money on one side by the government taking it or the government spending it, it has to come from the other person. So the other person can't spend it. The other person can't invest and save and do all the things that they need to do. So if you can't break it down to a two-person economy, then it just doesn't work out very well, because that's essentially what we are. Back to your point about a microeconomy versus a macroeconomy. And unfortunately, a lot of these Keynesians are lost within this macroeconomy sort of BS that they go through, right?
Can I go through one with you, though, Vance?
Yes.
Let me just, free lunch. Now, Milton Friedman always said there ain't no such thing as a free lunch, and quoted for it, and brilliant for it. I love Milton, but he's wrong. There are lots of free lunches. For example, if you're taxing people at 99% of their income, and you drop that down to 70%, you're going to get more revenues and you're going to get more output combined. It is a classic free lunch. In situation when you're making a mistake over and over and over again, if you just stop making that mistake, everyone's better off. And that's where I'd say the macroeconomics is one of the few places where we had a free lunch. Kennedy, the go-go 60s. John F. Kennedy cut the highest rate from 91% to 70%, cut the lowest rate from 20 to 14. He cut the corporate rate from, I forget, from 52 to 48%. He tried to cut it to 46, but the Republicans blocked him. He put in all these other special ones, the investment tax credit and all these things. We got a huge increase in output and a huge increase in revenues from Kennedy. It was a win-win-win-win. It was a free lunch. And so I don't use the Milton Friedman free lunch one except on the two-person world. I do use it there. I mean, if you have two guys, you give one of the two guys unemployment benefits. Who do you think pays for them? Maybe it's the other guy. That's why I say Harvard professors have round shoulders and flat foreheads. You know why? You ask them a question and they go, you tell them the answer and they go,
yep. Slap their stuff in the head. I'd love to hear some about your story. So I was a chief economist or associate director for economic policy of Office of Management and Budget in the Trump White House. And you had that position, which was chief economist of Office of Management and Budget in the Nixon White House. And that was you had it for the first time. So this was in the early 1970s. You came in, and it was a little bit different, I think, from now. Not a lot different. And in the meantime, we also had Larry Kudlow, one of our good friends, who had it during the Reagan administration, this same position. And it was interesting, though, because I think whenever you had it, it was chief economist of OMB. Larry Kudlow, from his story he told me, was that he changed it to associate director for economic policy because he wanted it to be on the same pay scale or the same, charisma or same level as the program associate directors. But what was some of your memories of that time?
You want the skivvies?
Yes.
George Shultz made it the economist. Capital T. That is an embarrassing thing to say. Who are you? I am the economist at the OMB. Well, there are 25 others there. No, but oh my God. So I always say chief economist, even though the title was the economist. That was George Shultz's thing for me, which was lovely. We had a big debate on what it would be called. The Office of Management and Budget. As you know, before it was the Bureau of the Budget. And that was done, I forget who it was that did the name there. I can think of it in a split second.
And it was in the Treasury Department. It wasn't in the White House or the executive branch.
No, it was. It was the study done by, but I just forgot the name. But we decided, was it going to be the Bureau of Office of Management and Budget? And that would be BOMB. Oh my God, no, we can't have it called BOM. And then we were going to say the Western Office of Management and Budget. That's out in San Clemente with the Nixon White House there. That would be the WOMB. No, it can't be WOM either. So what we decided was it had to be the OMB, not any. That was a cute little fun story at the time there.
Interesting.
And then it was the Office of Management Budget was the third choice, TOMB, the tomb. No, these are all fun stories there. And it was just fun stuff getting there in the beginning. But I think what our office was almost exactly the same as yours. The titles may have been different, but you had a director, and we had assistant directors there. We had both management and also the budget bureau, and the two fit right well together. I think they reduced the power of the OMB quite substantially when they put in the Office of Economic Policy in the White House, the one that Larry had recently.
Okay. National Economic Council?
National
NAC?
Economic Council, yeah. There was no such thing in my day. So I was, because the Council of Economic Advisors was not very powerful. It was Paul McCracken and Herb Stein and Hank Hautacker back in my day. So they weren't very powerful. And my boss was really powerful, George Shultz. So we dominated the economics there in the White House. I was 29 at the time. How old are you now?
So I'm 41.
Oh, well,
So I was 38 whenever I was there.
Yeah, well, I was a little bit younger than you, but it was just really cool having all that power back then, even though Nixon never listened to us. I mean, he put on wage and price control, devalue the dollar, all this horrible stuff. I told my mom one time that I'd written a speech for Nixon. I liked him very much personally. I really liked Nixon personally, but I said I wrote my speech for Nixon and Mom, and but he only changed 2 words in the whole speech. Well, what did he change? He said only 2 words. Everywhere where I put is, he put is not, and everywhere I put is not, he put is. But other than that, Mom, it's my speech.
Oh man. Yeah. So there's been a lot of changes since then. You and I just co-authored a piece in the Federalist talking about these examples that we have from the past of things not to do, like wage and price controls being one, but also things that we should be doing. Pro-growth policies of the Kennedy administration of the cutting taxes, the Reagan administration, of course, of cutting taxes and the regulatory reforms there as well. Even under the Clinton administration, you had a lot of pro-growth policies that were in place. And then most recently, the Trump administration with the Trump tax cuts. And in each one of these situations, there were things that I think you and I, as having more pro-growth mindset, that we would have done differently. For example, some of the tariffs during the Trump administration, I didn't think were the right way to go about it. But at the end of the day, what we saw were some historic growth effects of allowing, and the key thing here, Art, throughout our conversation that we're having here, is it helped the lowest income people the most. Their income was growing the fastest. Poverty rates were going down, the lowest on record. Real median household income with the highest on record going back to 2019, before the pandemic and the shutdowns and everything else kind of killed that growth. But I think when you look at historically, we have such great records. If you might want to expand on what some of those records are, far, and why can't we follow those today? Is it really just that's how far left and woke and progressive that the Biden administration is, or is there something else that's going on?
I don't think that's it, Vance. I really don't. I just think it's stupidity and ignorance and lack of ingenuity and work. They just don't look at the records. They don't look at the data. I talk to legislatures all the time, and you've got people who are not professional economists and all that, and you ask them what are the big policies, and and they can remember 4 or 5 things that have happened in their state in the last few years, and they may remember Prop 13, but no one looks at the whole repository of data. And we have huge amounts of data. Now, my formal model of the economy, which is 1972, I've updated it. It's still just as true as it was then. I mean, we have all of these data as to what actually happens when you change taxes and you change spending. We have a lot of data. These people are even so ignorant, Vance, as they use seasonally adjusted data for their models. And you can't use ratio to moving average seasonal adjusted data to any model. You've got to co-adjust for seasonality, which I did in the formal model of the economy, and all of the state stuff. We have 50 states. We have all their data for 100 plus years. We've got all the different things going. It's a beautiful thing for testing out theories and what looking, but these people don't do it. Harvard professors never do it. Yale professors, nope, sorry, Princeton professors. It's just shocking to me how lacking in inquisitiveness these people are. And then they pontificate, and then they take their PhDs, which is piled higher and deeper, and they then sit on top of them and are blowhards when they don't even know the facts of their own profession. And which really bothers me. And I have debated them, like Jared Bernstein. I felt sorry for Jared because he's not a trained economist. He's a PhD, mind you. But, he doesn't know this stuff. And he wants to defend his friends and his positions, but he doesn't know how to. Well, there's a reason why he doesn't know how to. The facts don't comport with his views. And yet he's not going to change his views. It's like doctrine. It's like religious beliefs. And, I've worked with more Democrats than I have Republicans. And, I did Jerry Brown's flat tax when he ran for president in 1992. I worked with Gary Hart at the end of Reagan. And then we've had a lot of Republicans who are really bad on economics. We've had a couple who have been good, like Trump and Reagan. We've had a lot of Democrats who are really bad, but you've had a couple of good ones like Clinton and Kennedy, as you mentioned, Clinton. But, it's not partisan. It's math. It's statistics. It's not opinion. Well, I have a different opinion of yours, Vance. No, you don't. Look at the facts. If your opinion comports with the facts, it's okay. If it doesn't, your opinion's got to go. Sorry, it's not how you feel. I know you would. You wish we could redistribute income, but we can't.
No. And one of the things to your point, Art, is that incentives matter, taxes have consequences, to your book title. When we saw
by the way, Jane Sinkfield, she did that title. I had some horrible title in there, and she laughed at me and she changed it to taxes have consequences.
Okay, it's a great title.
She also did the other one, The Wealth of States. She picked that title too. She's wonderful.
Oh, and the other one I think is Prosperity of the States.
No, The Wealth of States, it's called.
Okay, Wealth of States. Okay.
The nature and causes, an inquiry into the nature and causes of the wealth of states. Copied Adam Smith.
Good. Yeah, exactly. And one of the things that we had recently was kind of almost a natural experiment, to which we don't get too often in economics, but where we had the SALT deduction and the Trump tax cuts at $10,000, right? And we saw this flood of people that were leaving those high tax states because they couldn't write them off anymore. At least that was one of the reasons, right? Like California, New York, and Illinois, moving to places like where I'm at now in Texas, or I believe where you're at in Tennessee, or places like Florida that have no personal income tax. What do you think about with these different states and the impetus of having a pro-growth tax policy?
Let me go at you a little bit with the state stuff.
Please.
Yeah, you've got a great state there. And Florida is a great state too. But Tennessee is a lot better. We have the second lowest property taxes in the nation. We have no income tax, earned or unearned. Our income tax is in the Constitution, that is prohibited in the Constitution. We are a right-to-work state. Right to work is in our Constitution. We have a part-time legislature. A lot of this you have, but we also have the second lowest property taxes. And when you look at your state, property taxes and your franchise taxes are pretty high. So we are by far the lowest tax state in the nation. I mean, and I just want you and all the others to understand, you understand it obviously, but the others, is that it's not just the income tax. It's not just the sales tax. It's not just it's the whole conglomeration of all of it put together. And on the margin, it's that.
Yeah.
And it's really, really important to realize that there is a lot of substitution in there going on. But Tennessee, they're moving into Tennessee in droves for good reason. We don't have Texas. We don't have those longhorn cattle. We don't have all the Rio Grande and all the great food you've got there. We don't have the beaches of Florida. We don't have the mountains of the Rockies. We don't have president pictures on mountains. We don't have all of that stuff. We just got low taxes here in Tennessee. You don't even know the name of the major river here in Nashville.
Yeah.
Do you?
No.
Cumberland River. No one else knows it. It's not important. But you do know that when you work here in Tennessee and you buy things here in Tennessee, you pay less in taxes than any other state in the nation.
Yeah. That's right.
It's a lot more fun with lower taxes.
No, that's right. That's right. Because one of the things that I think Paul Krugman has said in the past about Texas is that, well, Texas has a great climate. Has he been here during the summer? It's really hot. It's 100 degrees basically every day during the summer.
Has he been anywhere at any time? No.
Yeah.
The guy is unfortunately a very angry person. And if I were Paul Krugman and I'd had the same bad experiences in my senior year in high school, I probably would be angry too.
Well,
can you imagine him in his senior prom?
Right. Yeah.
And I think the whole world.
What do you think explains kind of what's going on in Tennessee? Because you're right. I mean, Texas does have a very burdensome property tax system. And some will say, well, that's because they don't have a personal income tax. And I tell them, well, no. I mean, you got to look at Tennessee. You got to look at Florida. I think a lot of it is because of the excessive local government spending. And then they need to tax it in some way to keep their budgets balanced.
It's a feedback mechanism. It's a feedback mechanism. When you raise the property tax rate, all right, because property can't run away, property values drop, investments drop, et cetera. And then you run short of money, and then you don't have the public services to do the schools, et cetera. So you raise them again and again and again. And you get this bad model. Ken Keynes had a beautiful quote, which I'll share with you. I can't share it with you right now because I can't remember it, but it's how about a merchant kept raising his prices until he went and balanced his budget at naught and naught. It's a beautiful quote. That's the political model, which once you get addicted to tax increases to get more revenues, it ends up in this huge death spiral.
Yes, that's exactly right. Well, I think in the last couple of minutes that we have here together which has been great. I really appreciate this.
Well, I've enjoyed it a lot, Vance.
Yeah. Okay, good.
You're a fun guy, by the way.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. Same with you. And I've learned a lot from you over the years. And, what do you think are the most pressing issues of today? And what's going to be the best path forward to really let people prosper?
Okay. The thing that bothers me the most today are Republicans. Republicans want to indict someone, Mayorkas. They want to go after Hunter Biden. They want to go after all this stuff. Revengeful, nasty, bitter things like that have no place in our party. We have one thing we should be, and you and I wrote about it. Republicans know how to run business. They are the people. They are the guardians of prosperity. They are the managers of the economy. We know how to do that. Everything else falls out. If you're gay and like low taxes, you're in my camp. If you're straight and like low taxes, you're in my camp. If you're pro-life and like low taxes, you're in my camp. If you're pro-choice and like low taxes, you're in my camp. These are not our issues. Our issues is a big tent issue. We are the stewards of the economy, the guarantors of prosperity, and the Republicans do not have that message today. And they didn't have it under Jimmy Carter either. And it was Reagan who brought that in over the top. We need a leader who leads on growth is the answer. It answers all of these questions and all these problems, and all the social issues will take care of themselves. You guys battle that stuff out. But we want to have economic growth, period. And anyone who's for a pro-growth agenda is on our team. No matter what else you think, if you're tall, short, black, white, old, young, male, female, it doesn't matter. We're the people who want prosperity. And I'm very disappointed so far in the Republicans because that is not what they're saying. You listen to them on TV and they're angry, they're hateful, they're nasty. I don't like Republicans. I don't like them. I sure as hell don't like Democrats today either. But I don't like the Republicans because they're just nasty and harsh and bitter and revengeful. We cannot be that. We forgive other people their sins if they'll come to a pro-growth agenda with us, Vance. No?
Right,
are you with me on that?
I'm with you. Yeah.
I mean, the social issues are minor. I mean, what does equal rights in an unemployment line mean? I could go on and on with it. There's nothing that substitutes for prosperity and good incomes and good jobs and good employment, good families and good opportunities.
Yeah. Well, amen. I think that's exactly right. And I think that there's a lot to learn not only from the lessons that you provided in the past, but the ones that you're doing now. And so I really appreciate everything you're doing, Dr. Laffer. It's really been a pleasure to have you on the show, and I hope we can do it again.
I'd like to do it anytime. You're wonderful. And wasn't it fun being at the OMB?
Oh, yeah. It was a great experience, one that I'll always remember. I've learned a lot, and we'll continue to use some of those lessons along the way. And it's always a pleasure to talk with Larry Kudlow, and others as well. I was there. So thank the audience for them being here today. Please rate us as a 5-star rating wherever you listen to this podcast. And until next time, let people prosper.